Let me welcome everybody who's taken time out of their busy schedule to come to our meeting tonight. We're hoping we can give you some very important information. Given the times and some of the tragedies that have been in the news recently, there was clearly a need for our parents to be aware of some of the things that we have in place for the safety of our students and staff members at our campuses. In the safety and security department and things under that realm, I say sometimes that we sort of operate behind the curtain, in the shadows, and so people are not often familiar with some of the things we do have in place. So when they see a tragedy in the news, the assumption is we've got to do something because nothing's being done. Certainly we are reviewing our security practices and our measures that we have in place, but I think you'll find tonight that we have a lot of things in place, and we want to reassure you that we operate our schools as safely as possible. So tonight, let me welcome you again. My name is Joseph Parks. I'm the Executive Director of Safety and Security Services for Plano ISD. I've been with the district since 2010 as the Security Director. I'm also pleased to say that several of my team are here. Charlotte Gabriel, who is in the back, she's the security specialist for the Southwest cluster of schools, which will include the Wildcat Nation to which you belong, or assume most of you belong. I have my security coordinator, Sean Fulliger, for District East in the back, as well as Mike Scott, who's the security coordinator for District West. And lastly, Shannon Patterson, who's our administrative manager, who often runs the show around here. I'm also pleased to introduce several members of the Plano Police Department who are joining us tonight. First is Sergeant A.D. Paul. Sergeant Paul is the supervisor over the School Resource Officer Unit, and he is also the coordinator for Plano PD's Crisis Intervention Team. We have Lieutenant Sandy Tomio, who is the manager over the School Resource Officer program. She's also assigned to the Chief's office and is a former criminal investigative services supervisor. And last but not least is Lieutenant Michael Lunt. Lieutenant Lunt is the manager over Homeland Security for Plano PD, and he's also the training coordinator for the department. While we're here, again, we want to inform our parents and staff members, as it is, of some of the safety and security features that we have in place at our campuses, as well as projects we're currently working on and other things that we're evaluating now. And we want to reassure and ensure that the community knows that we're always looking towards safety and security, how we can improve, and keeping an eye on things like that. It's not just after a tragedy that's in the news that we jump to action. And lastly, we'd like to hear from you. If you have a question or a comment, we have question and comment cards around the back of the room. There were some when you came in. If you will fill those out and drop them in one of the red buckets towards the end of the presentation, we've reserved some time to answer questions. So if you would do that. Okay. So tonight we're going to talk about what we have in place now, some things we're working on in the future, and projects that are currently underway. We're also going to hear from the reps from the police department on the partnership that's so important between PISD and Plano PD in keeping our students and campuses safe. And as I said at the end, we'll take some questions from the comment cards. Okay, I'm just going to jump right in. These are things that are currently in place and have been for quite some time. The first is the standard response protocol. If you have a student at a PISD school, hopefully you are well aware of this. The standard response protocol is a system that was created by the I Love You Guys Foundation. I Love You Guys Foundation was started by a man named John Michael Keyes and his wife, who lost their daughter in a school shooting in Colorado in 2006. And basically what the Keys and their foundation did was they went around to numerous school districts, law enforcement agencies, and emergency management divisions, and they cherry-picked the best processes and procedures for emergency response that work well in schools. So it is geared specifically for use in schools. It's an efficient way of teaching our students and staff how to take 4 emergency actions, which are lock out, lock down, evacuate, and shelter. And those emergency actions can be used in a number of different types of emergencies. So it's sort of the foundation of our preparation. During the first week of school, in every school year, all students 3rd grade and above and all campus staff members review the SRP training video, which is about 30 minutes long. There is a elementary school version and there is a secondary school version. Within the both versions, there is something we talk about called the option to run. And what this is during a lockdown or any other emergency, we have to have an orderly way to address that emergency and have everyone know what they're supposed to do. If a lockdown is announced and that's all the information that's available, our students and staff know to follow the standard lockdown procedure: locks, lights, out of sight. Get behind a locked classroom door, turn out the lights, get out of sight, and be quiet. But we throw in the option to run, which is if you have other information, you've seen something, you've heard a disturbance, gunfire, you've seen something, some specific detail that you know about that would make it safer to just flee the campus, then students and staff can do that. That they're instructed that they can do that, because what we don't want are people, cowering in a room when it would have been safer for them to just leave. And so that's why we throw that in there as an important option. To bolster our efficiency and fidelity to the SRP system, we conduct mandatory emergency drills throughout the school year. During the first 10 days of classes, every campus has to conduct the 4 drills that you see on the screen: a lockdown drill, a reverse evacuation, a fire or evacuation drill, and then a shelter for dangerous weather. I know right now that what is on everyone's mind is active shooter, okay, and school violence. But what I, as the security director, have to make sure we remain focused on is that there are many other threats and concerns and dangers that we want to be prepared for. So I don't want us to be so focused on that one type of threat that we forget about other things. And North Texas dangerous weather is one of the things that we're going to see probably every spring. Okay, so the drills continue throughout the school year. They do drills at regular intervals. By the conclusion of the school year, they'll have done 9 fire or evacuation drills, 3 lockdown drills, 2 reverse evacuation drills, and 2 shelter drills. We conduct regular staff training on matters of safety and security. All of our campus administrators, which is the principal, the assistant principal, the administrative intern, have all taken the FEMA Incident Command System for Schools training. ICS 100 SCA is the course they've taken. And then they do a refresher course every year. And this is so that our campus leadership is aware of the structure that is used when we have to mobilize for an emergency. The district uses a training system called Safe Schools, which is an online training system that has video and online training modules on dozens and dozens of different topics. So every year before the new school year, the district leadership goes through and decides which of the courses within Safe Schools that our administrators have to complete. Safety and Security makes recommendations of 1 or more courses, and of course we always do the SRP video, but we also choose another safety relevant, security relevant type topic. In the past we've done visual detection of weapons, we've done dealing with aggressive persons, proper supervision of students, things like that. and that's for all the campus staff members. During the summer, when the principals come back to work following the summer, they have an in-service period. And during that principal's in-service, we put on a safety and security update, which I present safety and security reminders on procedures, processes. If there's been confusion that we've noted in different areas, we clear those things up. We discuss any new information, new procedures, new concerns. And what we've done the last 2 years, and then we'll continue, is we sort of convert this safety and security update into a mini school safety symposium. The last 2 years we brought in national speakers. One was John Michael Keyes, who was the founder of the I Love You Guys Foundation, and he shares with his experience with our principals and campus administrators about the loss of his daughter and what he went through and things that went wrong in that event and what we need to be keeping an eye towards to make that not happen at our schools. And he also, so he shares his story, and then he goes into some more basically training on the SRP, some of the fine points to that. Last year, we brought in Frank DeAngelis, who was the principal of Columbine High School when that shooting and tragedy occurred there. Same thing, we find it very effective to bring in another career educator who has lived the horror to tell our administrators about that experience and what the challenges were and how we can be prepared to do a better job. So we've brought those two speakers the last 2 years. Another thing is secure vestibule entries. About 5 years ago, a number of campus renovations were done to renovate the entryways of schools so that a visitor had to be buzzed in an exterior door, and then there was a physical barrier that forced them to go into the school office and then out a different door before the visitor could get into the secure areas of the school. So I don't know how many campuses we renovated, but it was probably 40, 45, or 50 campuses to have that two-door vestibule. Those of you that visit campuses or perhaps work on a campus, you're aware we have visitor management policies. Visitors have to show a photo ID, be scanned through the Raptor system, which is our visitor management system. Raptor checks the visitor for sex offender status and prints out a ID badge, visitor label, which has to be worn on campus. Our employees and contractors all have to wear their district ID badge, and our district policy requires employees to challenge adults who don't have the proper ID or badge on and have them go to the school office. Last year, we published a completely new set of emergency procedures, the Campus Administrator's Emergency Procedure Guide, and this is basically a procedure guide that addresses specific types of emergencies. Active shooter, active violence, dangerous weather, suspicious packages, suspicious persons, criminal activity on campus, missing children, a number of different specific type emergencies, and it in a very succinct format provides essentially a checklist of procedures for administrators and staff to follow. So every campus has a copy of that in hard form, but perhaps more important is that we had an app created that has all this information in digital form. So every employee, we have 7,000 employees and about 1,800 substitute teachers, all have access to download this on their phone, so they have this emergency information available at all times. Now, obviously, the idea is that people review this before an emergency, but by having it in the electronic form, it allows our staff and substitutes to have this information at hand at any time. And I didn't mention, all of our campuses also have an individual campus emergency plan, and that plan has to be reviewed by safety and security every year. and this is specific to each of our 72 campuses. This is where the campus leadership identifies specific staff members who will step up to emergency roles during an emergency. It creates a list of teacher buddy lists so that we pair our teachers with a buddy so they have help if they need it in an emergency. Maps for evacuation routes, relocation areas, any number of things that are specific to that campus. That has to be updated every year and approved by safety and security. All of our campuses have an emergency radio, and our emergency radio system is piggybacked off of the City of Plano radio system, so it's the same level of radio system that the police and the fire department uses. It'll reach the entire district. Every campus has one of these radios. They're required to monitor it throughout the school day, and this can be used as emergency communication if there's a phone line that's down, if the phones go down, if they need to make an emergency announcement to security or another campus, or if we need to make an emergency announcement quickly to our campuses. And the most routine use of that would be to, if we had a tornado warning and we're going to issue a stop dismissal order to all campuses, we can reach out, instantly to all our campuses like that. Each campus also has, and I mention this because, communication during an emergency is critical. All of our campuses also have the small walkie-talkies that you've probably seen staff members or administrators with, so they can communicate around the campus. Those come into play if a teacher sees a suspicious circumstance outside the school or in a hallway. They can radio the campus principal immediately, and if it's appropriate, put the school in lockdown, whatever. But all of our campuses have a number of those radios. The School Resource Officer Program, or the SRO program, and Sergeant Paul and Lieutenant Tomio are going to speak more completely about that program in just a minute, but I wanted to let you know we have a full-time police officer from either Plano PD or Murphy PD in all of our regular high schools, senior high schools, and special program schools. The Campus Protection Officer Program. This is a program we started for the 2013 school year. We hire off-duty police officers from numerous different agencies who work for us on a contract basis. They patrol our elementary and middle schools throughout the school day. They do vehicle patrols. They do walkthroughs of the campuses. So they're available for the high visibility patrol as well as being unencumbered so that they could respond in a life-threatening emergency to supplement on-duty local law enforcement officers. And one thing about this program, these officers, it's not a police department. These officers are not making traffic stops and writing tickets and writing reports and answering calls for service. They are unencumbered to do nothing but patrol the elementary and middle school campuses and respond in an emergency. We also can use these officers on a moment's notice if we need to deploy extra security at a campus for one reason or the other. We have a number of these officers on duty all the time, so they're available to us on a moment's notice. And I will repeat, this is not a Plano ISD police department. It's not a full functioning law enforcement agency. These are contract officers where the primary focus is on security versus law enforcement responding to calls for service, things like that. All of our campuses have specific staff members who have been designated as their first responders, and these first responders work with the school nurse to undergo first aid training. The school nurse has received specific training on trauma-related care and has special equipment on hand for that. So these first responders, and there's, depending on the size of the campus, there's usually at least 4, but in our larger campuses there'll be more. They're available by radio to respond to emergencies on the campus. Safety and Security Services. This is the department that I work under. We have a number of assets that we make available to our campuses. Every campus is served by a safety and security specialist who can consult on matters of emergency preparedness, anything related to safety and security, and assisting with urgent incidents. Now, our staff are not law enforcement officers, but what they focus on is more on the preventative side, looking for vulnerabilities, assisting the campuses with questions that involve a safety or security issue, any number of things. We also have an in-house narcotics detection canine and handler, as well as a explosives detection canine and handler, which is actually Charlotte Gabriel, who's one of our security specialists. We maintain a very close relationship with law enforcement. Now, this may not seem like a thing. It's intangible, but I will tell you that this is probably one of the most important safety and security features we have. There is not probably a lieutenant or captain or above of any police department that serves PISD that doesn't have my cell phone number. I have their cell phone number. We maintain contact with the various divisions. All of the representatives from Plano PD you're going to hear from tonight, we communicate very routinely and discuss things that may affect, the safety and security of our campuses. We have given hundreds of police officers from multiple agencies an all-access ID card so that when that officer is performing their regular duties, should they have a call at a PISD campus, they can gain access quickly. One thing that we have noted is we've gotten really good at locking campuses down. We can do it fast and tight pretty quickly, but the flip side of that is once the cavalry gets there and the officers arrive, they need to be able to get inside the campus quickly. Now, if it's a known dire emergency, officers are going to force entry and not look back. But in these other circumstances, we want them to be able to get in as quickly as possible. So we have given hundreds and hundreds of key cards out to the various law enforcement officers in the surrounding agencies that serve the district. And we've also made an emergency door key access code available to the different police department communication center. So if an officer who doesn't have a key card goes out on a call and needs to enter the building in an emergency, they can get that code from their dispatcher and get in the school. Okay, that is sort of the high points of the things we currently have in place. I'm going to speak a little bit about things that are currently in progress, projects that have been in the works for some many months, some longer, but they're coming to fruition. Probably one of the biggest is security enhancements at our senior high schools. This project, it was originated out of a bond package in 2016, I believe. Anyway, about a year and we've been working on it for at least the last year and a half. But what this will do is we're going to have an emergency PA and intercom system installed in the 3 senior high schools, as well as adding access controls to the exterior doors on all the buildings. These 2 systems will be integrated so that one of the features of the emergency PA system is the system will have pre-recorded emergency announcements, for example, to lock down, to lock out, evacuate, etc. And it'll have the precision language that we insist on when we use SRP. And the intercom system will be integrated with the access control system such that an administrator can push a button. It'll make the PA play the emergency announcement over the overhead speakers, and then it will automatically lock doors or unlock doors depending on how we set it to function. There is there's one term I'd like you to remember that I'm going to bring up a few slides down the road, and that is a straggler door. The access control system, the concept we're using is that all of the doors on all of the buildings will be locked, but during passing periods they'll be on a timer, and a certain number of doors will unlock during passing periods, and then they'll lock back. The thing about that's been a challenge for so long at the senior highs is these are multi-building campuses, and we have to be able to have kids and staff members and the people that work at the campuses and have business there be able to go from one building to the other. So keeping the doors locked had not really been an option. This will allow us to keep all the doors locked, and we're going to designate one, maybe two doors per building that we're going to call a straggler door. And I'm going to explain a little bit more about that in just a little bit, but keep that term in mind, a straggler door. That's going to be the designated point of entry for students and staff members when it's not a passing period, when everybody is moving. Beginning the 18-19 school year, we're going to require all students 9th grade and above to wear a photo ID card while they're on campus. This will allow administrators and staff members to more quickly recognize who belongs there and who does not. That can be more and more difficult when we get into some of the upper grades, when the 16-year-old looks like a 23-year-old, or we have some adults who wander onto campus that are 23 and look like they're 17. So this will allow the staff to quickly know whether that person should be there or not. Our security camera enhancements. Speaking to technology recently, our technology services department, the PISD has upwards of 5,500 security cameras in the district, an enormous number of security cameras. Over the last year, and then it'll continue for probably another 18 months or so, technology services is in the process of overhauling and upgrading our camera system. When that project is complete, it will be an enormously more user-friendly system, and I won't bore you with the details of that, but it'll be much easier to find out, know what you're looking at, where you're looking, and find things that you're looking for. But perhaps even more importantly is it will be of a type that will allow us to give police and first responders real-time access to our camera system in an emergency. So as you can imagine, in a critical incident, being able to have police officers who are responding or who are setting up a command post have real-time access into our schools is a huge thing. So we're looking forward to that completion of that project. We're going to, now the district has had an anonymous tip line for quite a while. It's on, if not all of the individual campus websites, it's on most, but we are going to, next Friday, April 20th, every student at PISD will watch about a 7-minute video that we're calling, the campaign of See Something, Say Something. And basically, it's a short video that talks about how it's important for students to report safety concerns if they see something suspicious, like talk about weapons or threats on campus, concern for someone's safety due to bullying, things like that, that it's really important that they do one of three things. They tell a trusted adult at home or at school, they call 911 if it's an immediate threat, or they use the anonymous tip line. And during this video, there'll be a tutorial that shows the student how to download the PISD mobile app and access the tip line. So this is the screenshot of the tip line. That's going to be rolled out, the video, April 20th. We're planning on conducting additional staff training. One thing we're going to do, and just to give you a little idea of some of the partnership we have with Plano PD, Micah Lunt, Lieutenant Lunt, made us aware of this Pathway to Violence video, training video that's published by the Department of Homeland Security. And it basically describes things that you can look for to try to recognize behavior when you have someone who may have a real or perceived, who they believe they've been wronged, and how certain people will move towards a pathway of violence and what to look for. So we're going to push that out as training to all of our campus staff members. We're also collaborating with Lieutenant Lunt and Plano PD to develop sort of a customized version of the active shooter training that you may have seen in the community. Some of you may have attended it. And Lieutenant Lunt's going to talk a little bit more about that. But basically, we're going to try to meld, SRP, which is school specific, into the active shooter training, which was developed for the general community, and try to get the best of both worlds and push that out to our campus staff members as well. Beginning this next school year, we're going to require 2 additional lockdown drills per year. We currently do 3. This is going to be a total of 5, and we're going to require that campuses do 1 of those drills during a passing period and 1 drill during a lunch period, because we want our campuses and staff to be, to be ready to respond to an emergency during those times as well, not just when they're, sitting conveniently in class. Many of our campuses already specifically do a drill during a passing period or lunch period, but the minutes that we spend away from academics doing 2 additional drills, I think, is well worth the benefit. So we're going to start that next school year. Now this is a huge project, a huge plus. That is expansion of the school resource officer program. Now, this still has to obviously be approved by the school board, but we've been in discussions for quite some time with the city of Plano to return the staffing levels of the school resource officer program back to what they were many years ago, which was actually many more officers. Because of budget cuts that began sometime around 2003 and went through 2009, the SRO program actually shrank to half of its original size. This expansion or return to prior staffing will involve 15 new school resource officers and 1 additional sergeant. This will allow us to staff every middle school with a full-time SRO, and we'll add a second SRO at each senior high school. So that is anticipated to start August of 2019. So not this school year, but the next school year. You may question, well, why are we waiting a year and a half? The fact of the matter is, for the Plano Police Department to hire, train a new officer such that they can replace an officer who would be selected for the SRO program takes about 12 to 14 months by the time you factor in a background investigation, the hiring process and screening, basic academy, field training, check ride, mini academy, all that. So that's why the time seems a little in the future, but that's probably coming. Okay, so that's what we have in the works right now. Some things that we're reviewing and considering. One is to place what we're going to call safety monitors, staff members at the 3 senior highs who would operate these straggler doors I mentioned to you. This would allow us to keep those doors locked throughout the school day. They would operate like the front doors of schools that you go to, where you have to buzz in and you're on video. These monitors would operate these remote doors in that fashion, so that if a student or staff member went to a building to the straggler door, they could see on video whether or not the person had their ID card and talk to them and then buzz them in the door. They could also monitor security cameras live, and they can also function as for lack of a better term, a hall monitor to walk the campus and be an additional set of eyes and ears looking for suspicious activity. They would have radio and phone communication with the school resource officers and the campus administrators, so that if they saw something that was suspicious or concerning, they could get an administrator or an SRO to that area. And also with the PA system and the access control system, the way it would be set up, if one of our safety monitors observed something concerning that warranted a lockdown or other emergency action, they could initiate that as well. So that's something that we're looking at. Another thing is random metal detector sweeps. I've been the security director at PISD since 2010, so I have been here following the Sandy Hook tragedy and then, of course, the more recent Parkland, Florida tragedy. Whenever we have events like that, one of the first things that people want to ask about is metal detectors. And I'll talk about this a little bit more later, but there are some inherent challenges in operating a metal detector every day at a campus that has a large population. Nevertheless, what we're looking at is revising our district's policy to allow random, suspicionless metal detector sweeps. And basically, this would allow a campus administrator or security personnel to identify in some random fashion an area of a school, a door, a particular building, a particular hallway, and announce that we're going to do a metal detector sweep of that area, and any student in that designated area at that time would be screened with metal detectors. And when we're talking about metal detectors, in that context, we're probably talking about wands, metal detector wands. We do have those available to our campuses for specific need, but this would be a pretty significant change in policy to allow, like I said, random, suspicionless sweeps, which those would serve as a deterrent, because you don't ever know when there's going to be a random metal detector sweep. That's the idea. We're also looking as part of a campus or a capital improvement program to modify some of our elementary school open pods. If you have kids in the elementary schools, you know most of the buildings were designed in an open pod concept, so that you have a main hallway, then you have some double doors that go into a grade level area that has 4 to 6 classrooms, and perhaps only one of those classroom areas has an actual locking door. They were designed to be open to provide flexibility when they were designed. We do hear from staff members and sometimes from parents about concerns about, well, how is the school going to go into lockdown if the classroom doesn't have a door? Well, the short answer currently is that the double doors that lead off to the pod, we call them the pod doors, those are significant, heavy doors, and those are what are locked to segregate that pod from the rest of the school. What we are going to do as part of this capital improvement program is look into ensuring that every pod has at least 1 or 2 classrooms with locking doors, with the idea that if a lockdown was needed and it would be appropriate under the circumstances, that we could have students from multiple classrooms congregate in one classroom. Now, I will tell you, because I have responded to some parents who are concerned about, having, we should have a locking classroom door on every classroom in those pods. I will tell you, sometimes when it comes to security, you are to gain something here, you're losing something over here. Most of our open concept elementary schools, at the rear of the pod, towards the outside of the pod, they have exterior doors, which in an emergency, that's an option. We talk about this option to run if we have all of the doors in the pod with closed and locked classroom doors. That's going to limit your ability to flee through the other exterior door. So it's give or take in a lot of these situations, but we're looking at adding locking classroom doors to provide an additional option to those elementary schools. Window coverings, we have a couple of campuses that when they were designed, were designed to be open and welcoming and very attractive, and as a result they have large expanses of glass, which is beautiful, but from a security standpoint, if you're trying to lock down that campus, one of the primary tenets is to be out of sight, so concealment. We're looking at what it would take to provide some sort of window covering, whether that is mini blinds or a curtain that could be deployed quickly, something like that, so that those areas would have concealment from the hallway. Threat assessment model. One thing that we are exploring, currently if a campus identifies or observes concerning or disturbing behavior, dangerous behavior on the part of a student, they can consult with Student and Family Services and the counseling department and require the parent to get a threat assessment done on that student. And how that typically takes place is the parent takes the student to a mental health professional to be evaluated and signed off, or an evaluation made. We are going to look into what's called a multidisciplinary threat assessment team model, which is a system that some school districts have. We're bringing in a speaker actually this summer from a school district in Oregon to present on this topic, and basically the threat assessment team is comprised of educators, mental health professionals, could be medical personnel, law enforcement, social services, and there's criteria that is developed to sort of classify, if you will, whether a student is truly a red flag significant threat or a yellow flag, we need to work with the student on his choices type situation. And then you have all of the involved parties who are available to make recommendations and lend their expertise in addressing whatever the issue is with that student. So that's one thing we're looking at. Okay, that is the PISD portion, if you will, of the presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Sergeant A.D. Paul, again, who is the SRO Sergeant or Supervisor for the City of Plano, and he's got some good information for you as well.
Thank you, sir. Joe just told me he's got Jason Deli on its way, so just hang tight. No, I'm just kidding. We're not going to get no food. We're not getting any food. Thank you for coming tonight. I love it when the parents and staff show up at one of these sort of events, because we need you in this whole system to kind of make it work, because you're probably one of the most important pieces in our program. I'm going to talk about the School Resource Officer Program, and really in the context of school safety while we're here tonight. And we're not going to get into everything that we do, but everything that we do towards school safety we're going to discuss a little bit. But again, the relationship piece is probably the most important thing. If you trust the officer at your campus, and you've discovered, and we encourage all of our parents to be helicopter parents, if you discover on something on your child's social media, conversations with friends, writings, drawings, anything that makes you suspicious, we want you to trust and feel comfortable that you can come to that SRO on campus and discuss this matter, and know that that SRO has the same philosophy to get your child to graduation, to get your child to have a successful time at our campus, to keep him and her in extracurricular activities, to help them realize higher education, military, vocation, whatever their dreams are, that's ours. And so if you trust that you can share with us something like that, knowing that our primary purpose is to get that student some help, then you're more likely to come to us. So we work hard at trying to garner those relationships. Our guys are some of the most trained officers in our department. We receive some of the best training around the nation as far as NASRO is the National Alliance on School Resource Officers. They study all these incidents around the country in detail, then they bring experts in to kind of teach our guys yearly what's going on and what the best practices that we bring back here to Plano ISD. And let me say something about our relationship with Plano ISD. Your campus and all the senior high campuses and all the feeder schools and the high schools that we were in are very, they treat us just like a team member. It's not this us and them kind of thing. They treat us like part of the staff. They welcome us to train with them, and so we have joint trainings often. We do every year conduct active shooter training individual from the rest of the police department. Our SROs are a little different because they're just a lone officer right now. At the senior highs we only have one. In the future we're going to have two. But their training is a little different than the rest of the police department. The rest of the police department we train as sort of a team because Joe mentioned the cavalry. And literally in Plano, if we put in a 911 call at this location, we could probably have about 16 officers here in a matter of minutes. But that SRO is on his own in that campus. So we do every year, we do active shooter training for that SRO. And just to kind of give you a real quick glance at the training, we've been doing active shooter training for over a decade now. We've gotten very good at responding to those active shooter events. What we started doing recently is we call it stop the dying. So you've heard of the officers are going to enter the school and go towards the threat. But now we're training on actually assisting those students who have been injured in those crisis situations and getting them medical attention as quickly as possible. We've also gone into more training. I'm going to talk about crisis intervention teams here in a minute. But all of our officers are Texas mental health peace officers. They have to go through a certification course to get that title. And basically what that means is they're trained to recognize mental illness and intellectual delays, and then how to communicate, de-escalate, and bring resources to that population when they need it. Traditional, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but traditionally, you know that the SRO is there to investigate crimes that happen on campus. But it's all related to school security. So if we learn about, if we're doing an investigation on campus, and during the course of that investigation we find a threat to the campus, then we immediately bring in safety and security staff and everyone else on board that investigation. We also work closely with our counselors. I told you that our SROs are all mental health peace officers. So anytime a student, if they come to us first and they voice something going on that they need help with, then we will bring our staff in and our counselors in, and they're terrific to work with. If you've ever been to one of our campuses after a tragedy, whether it's a motor vehicle crash, fatality, or suicide, those counselors and the officers work closely together to help those students the following day. And so we have a great relationship with those guys. Joe talked about that last slide, sort of this assessment team. We're sort of doing that now with our crisis intervention teams model that we developed here at Plano. And basically, Lieutenant Tomio was going to talk about kind of how these investigations, once they pop up outside the campus, primarily how the police department and CID, our detectives bureau, safety and security, campus administrators act immediately to address that threat. I want to talk real briefly about CIT. It's basically a program in which there's a training piece that they become Texas mental health peace officers, but also it's the collaboration piece where we get relationships with our emergency rooms, our big mental hospitals, even our small clinics. We probably know the managers and some of the nurses at those locations. And we also find out what's going on in the county. We have a great relationship with our mobile crisis team here in the county that will come to a campus to evaluate or assess a child, work with the parents. We also we have a mental health coordinator at our department. It's a full-time social worker. She sits on the CRCG, which is I always butcher this, it's the County Resource group. And basically what that is a group of professionals that work at the Child Advocacy Center. So they bring together law enforcement, social services, CPS, the district attorney's office is there. And so they kind of can work on cases that get brought to them from parents primarily. Parents have tried everything to address their child's issues. There's nothing's really seeming to work. There's financial issues. There's other issues with the family, and the parents are at their wits' end, and they haven't been able to modify the child's behavior. She can or he can bring a case to the CRCG, and Plano PD is right now is the only law enforcement agency on this group, but we can bring in McKinney or Frisco, anyone that is related to a case, and we work together to try to get that child and that family resources and try to get them to the top of the list on the state resources list. So that's what we're doing now. We follow the Memphis model with our police department. Basically what that means is we have a full program where we also have the training piece and the state mandated training, but we also go beyond that, and we've decided in Plano to all of our first responders are going to be crisis intervention teams, or in our state, Texas mental health peace officers. So every one of our first responders patrol, SROs, neighborhood police officers, SWAT team, anyone who wears a uniform and can come to an emergency has to have this training in our police department. Currently, we work with DPD and Collin College to provide that 40-hour class, and then we have ongoing training. Green Oaks Hospital, Timberlawn, the C Center, if they have an expert coming that's going to speak towards a mental illness or a developmental delay, they will invite us to have cops come and take that training. And so that's part of that relationship piece, and we do the same thing with the school district. I'm going to let Lieutenant Tomio talk about the next two slides. These are about the immediate threats. And what I like about this system is when typically with the SRO, and it's a delayed situation where there's something concerning that's popped up, we're already working on it, and we want to work it with you. In Texas, peace officers are the only one that can take someone involuntarily to the hospital, except one group, and that's parents and guardians. Parents and guardians actually have the same authority as police officers in taking their child to get the services. And when I teach parents, what I try to do is try to say, if your child had 107 fever, and you said, honey, we got to go to the doctor, and she said, no, I don't want to go, you have the authority to take your child with that 107 fever to the emergency room. If that child is exhibiting behavior that makes them a danger to themselves or others, you have the same right to take that child to a doctor to get that assessment or get that exam. And so that's sort of what we do. We don't want to do that. We always want to let the parents take their child in most situations to the doctor to get that assessment, like Mr. Parks was talking about. There are emergencies that come up, or situations with some families in which we're the only ones that have the authority, and we do that occasionally. But in some of these investigations, we want to have the parents and the family and their doctors and their support group get together and find out what the best way to overcome whatever the situation is in that family with that child. Lieutenant Tomio?
I do. Yes, that's right. Good evening. My name is Lieutenant Sandra Tomio, and I'm assigned to the Office of the Chief of Police, where one area of my responsibility is over the school resource officers. During my 29 years with Plano, I've spent several years in the investigative division, so I'm going to touch on that a little bit tonight too, as it relates to the threats that we receive and how detectives respond and what happens after that. For just the few minutes that I have to talk to you, I've boiled this down to 3 general categories of threats that come in, threats of violence, and how we respond. So the first one that I want to talk about is something that might be a general threat of violence with some specifics. And a good example of that is when we get wind of a possible fight after school. And sometimes that happens a lot when it gets close to the end of the year, or it is around the time of break for Christmas or something like that. And so even though that might not sound like that's very serious, but it can be if there's a large group that is going to fight, or if there's any kind of other general threat. So what we do with that is when it comes through the SRO, it's reported to Sergeant Paul, and I will then have a large contingency of uniformed officers working with Plano Safety and Security, PISD Safety and Security, to respond to the area. And so we'll have any patrol officers who are working that area, their supervisors, our neighborhood police officers, traffic unit, any officer who's in uniform and in a squad car who could respond to an area that, or to a school where we're worried about some kind of general problem that's going to go on. And we've had a lot of success last year with shutting down problems like that. Another category, I call it, is something that comes in like during the day when the school resource officer is working. It might come through a school official or the SRO. It could be a threat of violence against a person, another student, or a school official, or just a general threat of some type of violence. And we will, again, have Sergeant Paul respond. But with that, we have our detectives who will drop what they're doing, come there, start an immediate investigation, and that would entail everything that any other investigation entails, such as interviews and follow-up. It doesn't end there. It's then assigned to a detective. So they follow all leads to logical conclusions. They will get records, anything that they need to try to get to the bottom of any kind of threats. So we take that very seriously. And, even though it might be a juvenile who is the suspect, we don't let that be a factor. It is still investigated to its conclusion. Another type of situation that I call the after hours report, and this is something that you may be surprised to hear, that when everyone's gone home, the SRO, all school officials, and you have people that are at home, students and or parents who have come to some knowledge of a threat. It may be very general or specific. And so they then want to report that information. So then, of course, they don't have, the resources of the SRO or school officials. So they call 911, and naturally they get one of our patrol officers. So here is where you probably don't know this, that again, we have an immediate response to those calls. We've reinforced over and over with our patrol officers and the supervisors that we do not want that to be put on the back burner. It's not something that's going to be followed up the next day. It is something that we get on immediately, and that means even in the middle of the night, that we will wake up Sergeant Paul, Mr. Parks. We all start to work together to identify where this came from, and then even go to the suspect's house so that we can contact them, and that means 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, because we're not going to let that wait until the next day. So we, take this very seriously for these investigations. It's something that, we do not take it lightly. After the Parkland, Florida shooting, we had quite a few threats. That was a national trend, but it didn't matter. Each and every one of those were responded to and assigned to a detective and investigated, and even charges were filed on some. For all of police work and or investigations, there's a lot of complexities that I can't go into tonight because, I couldn't possibly cover all scenarios. But what I do hope that you will come away tonight remembering from my part of this is that we take the security and safety of your children very seriously. And that is not only on a professional level, because it's our responsibility, but personally as well, because we all have loved ones who are in schools that are either students or teachers, so we completely get it with your fears and concerns. But we demonstrate our seriousness and commitment to keeping your children safe by our immediate response to any information that we come by. And the other part that I hope that you remember is that when you see an SRO, I hope that you have heard that it's not just a one-person show. It is a whole team that is behind that person that is working. And we don't just talk this talk about partnership with PISD Safety and Security. We really mean that, and we are always working together. So whenever something happens, and all that SRO has to do is just let us know, and we're right there to support and try to get to the bottom of any kind of problems. So that is very, very brief, but I know you all want to get to your questions, so I want to turn it over now for a couple minutes from Lieutenant Micah Lunt.
Thank you, ma'am. Good evening, folks. My name is Michael Lunt. I'm the Homeland Security Lieutenant. I'm also overall training at the Police Department for all sworn and civilian folks. We've got about a 600-person department, 400 or so sworn, 200 or so civilian, and myself and the wonderful folks that I work with out in the training unit are responsible for all their training. Homeland Security, as you may or may not have heard, really starts at the hometown level, and there's 4 pillars to that. Connect is number 1. You've heard everybody that's stood up here talk about relationships. We have great relationships with PISD. We are very well connected with them. Then we plan. And part of the planning aspect of Homeland or hometown security with PISD is they provide us with a lot of resources. And so when we have an emergency at a PISD facility, a lot of our officers already have familiarity with those facilities because they've been inside. That's one of the things that we encourage our patrol officers to do, is to go inside, stop by the schools, and become familiar with the layout of the campus so that if something does happen there, they're able to respond and they know how to get to critical areas as quickly as possible. We have emergency contacts, and I'm not just talking about who to contact in the middle of the night in case of a pipe burst. I'm talking about who at that particular PISD facility has got access to the cameras that they can see on their phone and provide us intelligence while we're responding. Mr. Parks talked about programs to get that standardized, basically, where it's available to our officers real time. But right now we handle that through some other ways, and emergency contacts is one of those ways where we can do that. PISD is very gracious to provide us with facilities to train in. At the Plano Police Department and really in the city of Plano, we have our public safety departments comprise the police department, fire rescue, public safety communications, which is a fancy name for dispatch, and then our emergency management department. And every other year, we conduct full-scale active shooter exercises. So that's where we literally take over a facility. We have several actors go inside to include shooters. We have folks get simulated in terms of being gunshot victims. We respond, the fire department responds, our dispatchers train. It's a giant, large-scale activity that involves all of our personnel. And PISD has provided us with facilities to practice those things in, which also increases our familiarity with those campuses and just further shows support for the kind of relationships that we have. These full-scale active shooter exercises include every single police officer in the department. I mentioned earlier how big our department is. Our fire department is also very large. It also involves every single person that is one of our dispatchers. So that's a lot of personnel to get through those trainings. But we believe that that training is so important that the city actually budgets overtime to allow us to complete all of that training while still maintaining all of the normal services that we provide in the city. And it does provide us with a tremendous amount of benefits to include, we refine our tactics. We learned a few years ago that we could be better in terms of how the police and the fire department interact whenever we form what's called rescue task forces. When we go inside, it's still a kind of a hot zone. We haven't entirely cleared the building yet, but we get inside with the fire department as quickly as possible and evacuate those that are critically injured. And we learned, actually 4 years ago, that we could do that part a little bit better. We practiced it the next year, and now we're going to try that again. So there are a lot of benefits to both us and PISD through that partnership and through that training opportunity. Mr. Parks also mentioned this customized training that we're working on to kind of combine the run, hide, fight, or civilian response to active shooter events training and the standard response protocol. Did any of you by chance go to any of our large community events for citizen response to active shooter events? Ah, fantastic. Very good. A couple of you in the back did. So you've seen that. And, you know, the standard response protocol is an outstanding program. It absolutely is. And there's nothing within the standard response protocol that is inconsistent with or contrary to run, hide, fight strategies. But the standard response protocol is a campus program. It's really designed for campus management. Run, hide, fight are individual strategies that individuals can employ or very small groups of people. So what we're going to do is kind of marry all that together in terms of providing the best of both worlds for what works best for PISD staff and students, and we'll be rolling out that training later on. I guess they tell me that they're going to record it and then share that with a lot of folks, because PISD is a very big organization. So we'll provide some live trainings, and then otherwise we'll push the rest of that out on video. And that's my portion. So I'll give this back over to Mr. Parks.